everybody. Welcome back to theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Again, that website address is theclinicaltrialsguru.com. One of the things we've been doing recently, thanks to Darshan, who you see on this Hangout, is a Google Hangout. And I'm joined by Darshan Kulkarni and Patrick Stone. And Darshan, he's been a regular guest. Actually, both of them have. Darshan is an attorney who focuses on pharma law. And part of that is clinical trials. So for you guys watching who are in the clinical trials industry, I mean, Mr. Kulkarni is by far the best person for anything related to law revolving around clinical trials, or just pharma in general. On top of that, he's a pharmacist, so he has a lot of knowledge and a lot of background as far as the molecular designs of some of these protocols. And so we can talk about comparative effectiveness research, generics, things like that. He's got a great deal of expertise when it comes to that as well. He's also an author, a blogger, a speaker. Did you speak at that conference, Magi?
I'll be speaking at Magi actually starting Sunday.
Okay. So for those of you out there who are watching this video early enough, say hi to Darshan in the future. And then we have Patrick Stone. Patrick Stone, and by the way, I got to mention, these are both Clinical Trial Guru producers. Pat Stone is a former FDA auditor. Right now he's a consultant, and he's doing very well. And he is also one of our most popular guests because he was an FDA auditor. And so he's got tons of stories, tons of experience as far as FDA audits, which is something that sites really are fearful of. And he's also an author, and I got to hold up this book, Bubblegum Badge, an FDA His Story. And you see it's his story. Get it? So basically, this is a must-read book for anyone in the industry. It's if you have anyone at your site, or maybe you're from a CRO or a small biotech, and anyone has any fears or reservations about the FDA, and maybe they're scared about doing clinical trials because they're fearful of the FDA, this book will kind of demystify those fears, because I gave it to some of my PIs, and they are no longer as fearful. Okay, they still have some reservations, but they are not as fearful as they were because they have knowledge now, thanks to Patrick Stone. So Pat, welcome, and Darshan, welcome. And we will talk about something that I think is important and is going to be a trend in clinical trials, if you guys don't mind, and that's adaptive research. And I'm not making this up. I had a monitor at my site today, and she was telling me to tell my coordinators to please enter their data faster. And I said, okay, I understand, but why? You know, we had no adverse events. There's nothing really to report. I mean, I'll make them do it, but why are you bugging me about this? And she said, Dan, it's not that I like to bug you, although I do. She said, Dan, it's because of something called adaptive research. And I said, yes, the research where they analyze data in real time and they change the protocols because of what they find. And I said, how silly of me to forget. Let me go tell my coordinators to enter this data. So basically, if there's a clinical trial going on, and there's 80 sites, and a statistically significant amount of those sites, or a statistically significant percentage of those sites report the same adverse event, the sponsor can update the informed consent to include a new adverse event. They can change the protocol to to minimize the risk and the harm, or the potential harm, to future subjects. And they can do a lot of other stuff, which Darshan and Pat can tell you about. So what are some of the other benefits of adaptive trials?
Patrick, do you want to start? You'd like me to start?
Go ahead and start.
So the big advantage of adaptive studies is theoretically the FDA. First of all, the FDA tends to like them when you're doing adaptive studies. They tend to think that you've actually planned out your entire process. You see a lot of adaptive studies, for example, in oncology. They tend to start from phase 1 and go into phase 2A, even 2B in certain cases. And the reason is that theoretically you pay a smaller statistical penalty for looking at the data because it's all planned up front, and the idea is that you know what steps you're going to take and how you're going to take them and when you're going to take them, and it's not this haphazard, oh, I'm going to go and look at my data and peek at the data and then try to change my study. It's really planned up front. And therefore, adaptive designs are theoretically supposed to be the wave of the future. But the truth is, though, Dan, as far as I know, there are very, very few studies that are actually adaptive design because of the tremendous amount of work that you need up front. You need to have thought of pretty much every scenario. You need to have said, if this happens, then 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 this happens. And that's great if you can actually pull it off. But a lot of times you just can't pull that off. And think about the actual amount of money you need to plan a study for those many different possibilities. I mean, CROs would love that, but the fact is that a lot of sponsors would say, I can't afford to have so many situations, permutations, and combinations, because you have to plan for all of that. So adaptive studies and adaptive design is a wave of the future. The question really is it going to catch on, or is it going to be like what I think of as QR codes, where you see ad agencies trying to push this whole QR thing, but it never actually catches on. You say you're doing one. In your experience, do you think that it's going to catch on, or is it too burdensome on a site?
Well, I mean, I guess we're doing one, and I didn't even know we're doing it. So it's not burdensome on the site. It might be burdensome on the sponsor, and maybe that's why they're bugging me about this. But who knows? I mean, I might have other trials that are, operating the same way. I mean, nowadays they expect all data to be entered within 48 hours, 72 hours. So I would assume that most have some type of adaptive design.
But what if you actually responded with, "Oops, made a mistake. I haven't done it." I imagine they'd bug you a lot more. And I would imagine if you're doing one study, that's fine. But what if you're a larger site handling 20, 25 studies, and that you'll see a lot of academic medical centers doing that. And I can't imagine them all being able to put in the data in real time like they expect.
Well, so, we have about 15 trials going on, and we're a relatively small site.
Yeah.
Well, I would say like medium now, but yeah, I mean, we normally at least do weekly. Although for the studies that take some priority over the others, we do 48 hours. I don't know if it's just for the adverse events and helping future study participants. I'm all for it. From what I understand, it's also supposed to make the trial cheaper for the sponsor, which I don't understand.
Well,
is the protocol bigger?
No, the protocol is the same, but I guess they have more amendments.
I don't. The protocol is the same. Maybe the portion of the protocol you see. I have to imagine to do an actual adaptive study, you have to have a substantially larger
turn
protocol.
Something else in, some bigger part in before.
Exactly, that's what I would expect, Patrick.
Because they wouldn't show us the adaptive part, like the regular investigator at the site that goes to the site, the FDA guy. They wouldn't really show him the adaptive part per se. They would just give you the primary and secondary efficacy endpoints, or whatever data listings they had. You go to the site, you compare those to the source documents in the case report form, whether it's electronic or paper. So it wouldn't really change the way the audit is conducted per se. It would change the way the review is done from the review division standpoint.
Well, how about we talk about how technology can help or change clinical trials in the near future? I mean, the argument is that adaptive trials are going to be gaining some market share because of technology and improved technology. Like 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, we were not able to monitor this data in real time. I mean, the coordinator would enter it in a paper CRF. Remember those days? I mean, it was not that long ago. And then a monitor would come and actually rip those pages out after she reviewed them, or he, no sexism here, and then would FedEx them to her supervisors. And that's how the data was collected. That process takes months versus like minutes now. So that's because of technology. So how is technology going to help clinical trials in the future become even more efficient than this?
I think one of the big things you have to consider is the fact that you now, if you look at the FDA guidances that are coming out, they want centralized monitoring. So technology is enabling that whole process. And when you talk about adaptive studies where you actually are saying, I'm going to make future decisions based on current data, having centralized monitoring where you're looking at all the sites, giving you all the data pretty much in real time, as you say, that's going to help with A, centralized monitoring, and B, making decisions for your adaptive studies in the future. Patrick, would you add to that?
Well, so another thing is that you have lab reports pre-populating CRFs, and you have different modes of electronic transfer to where you don't have this transcription errors, and you don't have the input phase of the human interface is becoming minimized when you're able to uh, have everything in an electronic format, whether it's the chemistry, blood draws, some sort of tests that you're conducting, whether they're EKGs, ECGs, MRIs. Some of this stuff now will translate directly as an electronic record into the CRF. So, it does speed everything up. And, you know, there's still some components that don't talk to each other, don't work together, like, let's say, the patient record and the case report form. Sometimes hospital systems don't want this grabbing of information, and there may still be some input from a human interface. But for the most part, I think real time is sort of the norm now. I mean, I know FDA always like to see that, you say you did an evaluation on Monday. Well, the data should have been entered into some format by, at least 3 days, 4 days. I mean, you start uh, having more chances for error or not getting all the data down if you start taking a week, 2 weeks, a month. I mean, I've seen some long turnaround times for inputting data, and you see a lot more mistakes being made as you do that.
Now, we talk about central monitoring, and I've talked about this topic with both of you separately. What we just finished talking about now. What about we take it a step further, and we just had another hangout where we talked about audits. What about central audit? Would that ever happen?
I think it happens already in a certain sense. I mean, you're looking at data and you're saying, does it make sense? You may need to still go to the site to look at source documentation, but the fact is that centralized auditing is very similar to centralized monitoring in that you're trying to get the same data points. You're trying to look at how that data was arrived at and whether it's trustworthy. Obviously, to look at a level of how much can you trust it. For that, you do have to go on site. You do have to get that information. But even that, theoretically, in the new age where you can scan documentation, where you have EMRs, even that documentation can theoretically come online. And that's what's going to happen with the Affordable Care Act, where people are being given money to put that data online. So that could be the wave of the future. But in terms of just centralized monitoring, it's easier to do. I'd say a true centralized audit is probably the next stage, the next phase, but there'll probably be a lot more negotiations because of concerns like HIPAA, where people don't want their patients' data being shared electronically because they don't know what software you have, whether that software is HIPAA compliant, and how you guys protect the software. Does that make sense, Patrick?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's other concerns now with HIPAA laws, and they're trying to write some new regulations with regard to, and I hate to bring this into this, but the HIPAA laws may change with regard to psychological profiles and um, what information can be given to the government
Mm-hmm.
by a psychiatrist, psychologist, for veterans, for people with bipolar disorder or what have you.
Hmm.
They're trying to change some of the HIPAA laws to where right now most hospitals don't allow any access to the patient records via internet or interface by a monitor or sponsor. Now the clinic obviously has access to the records, but the hospitals or the caregiver system usually doesn't want a third party in their system. So there's still some room for improvement on security and concerns about HIPAA and who may be granted access to a patient's record. So there's still some hurdles to be jumped for true total electronic autonomy.
Yeah. But yeah, Dan, I think you may be running out of time because I think we don't want to bore the audience too much.
Yes, no, I do want to say I just remembered happy birthday to Pat. Late birthday.
Yes. Happy birthday,
Right?
Patrick.
Thank
That
you.
was yesterday, right? Or 2 days ago?
Tuesday.
Tuesday, all right. Well, happy birthday, Pat.
Are you
And for
25
those
now?
of you...
I think Patrick's 25.
25, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yes.
Definitely.
Very good. And the birthday boy wrote this book. Is it 3 years already since you wrote this book?
2 years. 2 years.
2 years. Bubblegum Badge. I don't know if I plugged it in this video or in another one, but it's an awesome book. And it basically is Pat's story about his career with the FDA. And there's so much valuable information there for the research clinics. And Darshan, him and I will be working on a webinar shortly, but if you want to get a hold of Darshan, conformlaw.com, right?
Absolutely. Or you can
And
just
then
find him on Twitter at FDA Lawyers.
At FDA Lawyers, yes. And then we have 2 DVDs, Introduction to Clinical Research and How to Get More Studies for Your Clinical Trial Site, both available on my blog. $97 each, I think. And I used a very complicated formula to get that price. Believe me, a lot of algorithms, and they both came out to be the same price. Amazing, but true.
Supposed to get a formula.
Yes, very, very complicated formula, and they both came out to the same price. Amazing.
Consider using an adaptive design trial to evaluate pricing structures next time.
I am. I need a sale per second, or we're adapting it.
There you go.
All right. Now, anything else you guys would like to talk about?
No, thank you.
Okay, I'd like to give all my clinical trial group producers a shout out. Sarah Elizabeth Siegler, Resolve Research Solutions, Accurate Clinical Trials, Erdhart Clinical Trials, PTNR, Patrick Stone himself, also Darshan Kulkarni, Biopharm Systems, Zymewire, Mozio, South Coast Clinical Trials, Breakthrough Clinical Trials, and St. Paul Medical Research Center. And I'm getting a lot of them now. I'm hoping not to forget anyone, but it's $99 for a lifetime. And that's it.